Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of Your One Black Friend. I'm your hostess, Jolie, and let's start the show. So, sorry, guys, it's taking me a while to put out a new episode because, frankly, I didn't know what to talk about. Not because I didn't have ideas. It was almost like I have so many things to talk about that I didn't know what to start with first. So I told myself, Joe, just go into the studio, sit down, hit record and start talking. And as I prepared to do that, as I was setting up my various slides, I got a text message from Allwin. You guys know Allwin. Allwin is my editor in India. Shout out to Allwin. And he messaged me and he said this. I'm going to share with you with his permission. He said, I am sleepless and I have some deep thoughts. I'm seeing a lot of people pass in recent times, both young and old. Most of them seem to have had an unfulfilling life. Their stories make me sad, makes me wonder, are we just here to suffer? Even after we pass, our close ones suffer the passing. Everyone is cursed by the time thing. The cycle repeats. Every generation, no matter how advanced they are, they all suffer. I saw my grandma pass and her memory is still in my head. I'm seeing the same health situation and the other elderly family members. Time is the worst. What is the point of life? The purpose? I don't want my future kids to grow old, suffer, and pass. I don't like this cycle of suffering. I'm going to write somewhere like a will or something. No one should be sad after I pass. I'm more than happy to leave this realm. I'm giving this realm a negative rating. I'll make at least one joke. Everyone who comes there should be happy. I'm assuming he means his funeral and leave in peace. Also, no religious ceremony. Now, that is worth just sitting with because his thoughts are not unique. We've all sat with these thoughts. It's hard not to. It's hard not to look upon your loved one and for a second think it's going to come a time when either I'm not going to be around for them or they're not going to be around for me. It's hard not to watch as year by year we watch the aging change of people we care about over time and not struggle with that. It's hard. For the most part, when these thoughts arise, we take them and we ruminate on them a bit and then we put them to the side because ultimately there's not much that we can do about it, really. And if you sit with these thoughts, well, that's how you get depressed. But I told Alwyn, you know what? I was looking for something to talk about. Let's address what you brought up. First thing I said to him was, are you suffering now? Because you are only suffering in your head. Most of the time when we suffer, a lot of the time externally, there's nothing wrong. You're usually sitting in the comfort of your home, somewhere comfortable with a roof over your head, something warm to sleep in, a nice comfortable bed, you're fed, you're clothed, you're doing well. So it's not the external. If you focus on the now, if you focus on present moment, if you focus on what is in your vicinity right now, you're not going to suffer. But then we have our minds, the internal monologue. It comes in. And what does it do? Well, it does its thing. It starts pulling up situations. Are you at peace right now? Just sitting, chilling, minding your own business? Well, here's some things to really fuck things up. So what I said to him was, are you suffering now? To which Allwin responded, because of thinking, yes. And what I said was, what is causing you to suffer is the lie that we're told about death. You see, there's so many people out there who believe that death is the end because that is what we're conditioned to believe. But I've lived long enough in this reality to realize that if you're searching for the truth can be found in the opposite direction of what the collective has been programmed to believe. Death is not the end, it's a cycle. You're not a mistake, you're not an accident, you're not an insignificant happening. This is not an accident. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only modified. Thus, you are energy embodied in matter. You have been modified in matter. And because you're a consciousness, which cannot be created or destroyed, you're energetic being that cannot be created or destroyed, only modified. You are presently in what I would consider a dream. Not just me, obviously. We've all heard the expression, life is but a dream. As Einstein put it, reality is a dream, albeit a persistent one. If you die in a dream, you just shift to another dream, this persistent dream, and keep on living. You can have 1,000 dreams in a month and experience death in each one. And each dream can feel just as real as this one, this persistent one, this collective one that we know of as reality until you wake up. So what I said to him was, we suffer because of the lie we are told about death. Death is an illusion. Death is not the end. This is a consistent, persistent dream. And when you die, when your body fails you in this reality, the body being nothing more than a vehicle made of matter, a glorified robot, if you will, in a simulated reality, what we call the material world, which is nothing more than energy constructed and defined by our central nervous system. All illusion, all Maya, all a game, all a dream. When you die, you wake up. Now, imagine we lived in a reality. Somewhere out there, there's a parallel universe where we're told something different. We're told something about the nature of our reality. We're told something about our bodies, about what happens after we leave, about it being a cycle. People are collectively taught in schools the eternal return, or at least that theory. People are programmed to believe in reincarnation. If you grow up with this idea in your mind as to death, life, rebirth, reincarnation, consciousness, energy, and this is believed by the majority of people, you wouldn't suffer. What's causing the suffering is our idea of what this reality is. I said to Allwin, I said, stop thinking. You weren't suffering before you started thinking. Stop thinking. The moniker that I've chosen for the podcast when I started it was Joe the Overthinker, because I definitely was a chronic overthinker. And more as I play the game, I realized that, Joe, stay in the day you're in, stay in the moment you're in, stay in the experience you're in, stay in the present that you are in, because what will be has been. When you have to make a decision, you will intuitively make the right decision. Stop thinking. There's a couple of books I've been posting about on my stories and Instagram by Leonard Shlain, I believe it's his name. One is Sex, Time, and Power. And then the other one I think is called The Alphabet and the Goddess. The third is Who Built the Moon. But the first one, Sex, Time, and Power, worth reading and rereading. And I would argue the second one about the Alphabet and the Goddesses is worth it as well. But I just started it, so I can't comment on it too quickly so far. But it is referenced in Who Built the Moon, which I have read and I am rereading. And in it, he talks about time and the construct that we are sort of succumbed to. We are under this illusion of time. Our collective belief in, I had a thought there and I lost it, but maybe it'll come back to me. But our collective belief in what we think this world is, in what we think. I think I was thinking about, or I was going to talk about the worship of the goddess. I think he said something to the effect in the book about how if you ask a man about time, he's going to tell you that time is a line. If you ask a female about time, she's going to tell you it's a cycle. Because in a way, a female bleeds every month. And according to him, and I've not done research to follow up, but I would imagine he wouldn't have put it in this book if it weren't true. Only human beings, only the human female bleeds as profusely as she does, and for as long as we do, and in a cycle that mimics the moon. So in a way, you make the argument that women die every month, but we don't. And so when you get accustomed to seeing what looks like a petite death every month, you start to understand that there's something happening internally. It's just a passing of the egg. Once again, you start to understand that there's just something happening internally that appears like death if you were ignorant as to what was going on in your body, if you were not taught what a menstruation is, what ovulation is, what a luteal phase is, you would think that you were dying. But even if you thought you were dying, if you menstruated the first month and then you survived, assuming you didn't panic and read too much into what was going on, you survived the 7 days of bleeding. And then it happened again the next month. And then it happened again the next month. And it managed to sort of sink in with the moon. Eventually, you'll start to go, wait, I'm fine. It's something that's just natural. It's a cycle. And so he said, women understand life as a cycle and they're less afraid of death. And I'm making the argument that it's because, well, we technically die. every month. Whereas men don't have to actively face their own mortality on a monthly basis, where they see copious amounts of blood spill from their body every month. There is no cycle that they have to adhere to with visible markings. And so it's different. And I take that idea and I take it a step further. Because we are living in a patriarchy, it's a male dominated society. Our relationship with death is born from a masculine mind that doesn't experience cycle on a day to day or a month to month situation. And so as a result, we fear death. And I'm saying, just as if you didn't have the knowledge that this bleeding is just natural for a hominid, for a Homo sapien female, then there would be fear associated with that. And I take you back to imagine a parallel universe, a society where people aren't told that you're an insignificant nothing, that you're just here to live and die. And so it doesn't matter. And that's just a belief that's imposed on us. It's not true. You cannot prove that. And there have been countless books written about people who have out-of-body experiences, NDEs, near-death experiences, which I've called death experiences. I don't call them near-death experiences. These people actually died. They were labeled clinically dead. And then they came back to tell us that, wait, there's stuff on the other side. People can dismiss that as much as you want until you've had that experience. You can't say that these people, you cannot negate these people's experiences. They died and came back, and they've said, death is not the end. For whatever reason, we live in a society that, despite these people literally surviving death and coming back and telling us it's fine, that it's actually, you're more connected on the other side. You feel more whole and more one with the universe, and you feel less, well, anxious and less disconnected and less lonely. You understand the true nature of reality when you exit the body, despite these constant stories of people continuously coming back and telling us, hey, it's okay. We still live in a society that tells us to ignore them, ignore these people's experiences because science, and it lends itself back to the patriarchy. Somewhere out there is a parallel universe that is not a patriarchal society, that is a matriarchal society, or at the very least, egalitarian and balanced. And what I mean by that, and I'd almost prefer egalitarian, because then both male and female and what they bring to the table are brought into balance. But a woman's experiences and a woman's perception and her understanding of the cyclical nature of reality, of life, of death and rebirth, in a way, is taking into consideration and taken seriously in the terms of the overall narrative that the general public in that reality is taught. And going back to the book, Sex, Time, and Power, he said, like, there was a time when we were matriarchal. Humanity was matriarchal and governed. Society, religion, spirituality was governed by the moon, predominantly feminine deity. And we were also more at peace. We also were more connected with our environment and with each other. And now the pendulum has swung the other way, where it's now we're at war with nature and the environment and ourselves. And there's a disconnect from what we really are, and a disconnect from the understanding of our nature. And so there's fear, even though when you look around, everything cycles. We have summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring. It's all a cycle. Even the trees, once again, appear to die. Without knowledge of all the other seasons, if you came into the winter and you looked around, you would say, these things are all dead. These are skeletons. They come back. Now, you can make the argument that, well, not everything that dies comes back as far as like a tree is concerned. Yes, that's true. And I can't speak towards the esoteric nature of spirits once they leave. You could make the argument that some people, once they leave this reality, do not come back to this reality. But that doesn't mean that they stop existing. They just no longer take form in our reality. So that is my counter to that. Most people suffer because of their understanding of what is happening to the body, what is happening to your loved one. It's because of what we're told about the nature of our reality that there's fear around that. But if you were taught something different, then there would be no fear. Now carry on. I said, you're not your body. the body breaks down. But I would even make the argument it breaks down the way a tree appears to break down as it gets closer to winter. The leaves shed, things turn brown, wither, but then it cycles. And maybe we don't see that cyclical occurrence. There's an expression that says death is only something that happens to other people. And it made me think about a video that I was sent by a friend of mine, Cosmic. Shout out to Cosmic. He's been on the show a couple of times. And there's a guy that's sitting on a bench, and another guy walks up to him and gives him a flyer. The guy sitting on the bench rejects the flyer, and the guy who walked up to him slaps him and gives him the flyer again. And then the guy sitting on the bench takes the flyer. Now, usually there's a victim sitting next to the guy on the bench observing it. And when the victim sees the guy on the bench get slapped and is then offered a flyer, the victim takes the flyer. The guy on the bench and the guy who's handing out the flyers are working together. The slap was never going to happen to the victim, but the slap of the guy on the bench by the guy handing the flyers out was intended to cause fear to get the person who was really intended to receive the flyer to conceive, to behave in the way that both parties, the flyer hander outer and the person sitting on the bench, wanted this person to behave. So when you say death is something that only happens to other people, and you hear sort of stories or read philosophy that says we go through all our lives and in the back of our mind, we feel like we're not really going to die, that death is something that only happens to other people. And then these philosophical sort of maxims want you to stop and sit with your own mortality and really go like, no, actually, one day I will die. My response to that is maybe you won't. Maybe that is the nature of the construct, to shield from the rest of us that cyclical nature while we exist in a particular reality. Because if you died and everybody else experienced you dying, but then due to quantum immortality, your consciousness just gets transferred to a parallel universe where you survive whatever it is that killed you. You never realize that you didn't actually die. And the people around you experience death, but they never realize that you didn't actually die. And so it prompts them to behave in a way, it makes them more controllable, more pliable, more likely to behave in particular ways because, well, they've just seen somebody they love pass away. What if you were programmed with a different understanding? Because I'm telling you, we're only reacting to the knowledge that we believe, the knowledge that we've chosen to accept on the nature of reality. And I'm saying, what if you chose to accept something else? Because if you were fully conscious and aware, and you lived and you withered and you died, only to remember that you're coming right back again, either as this form or as somebody else, if you remembered this fact, there wouldn't be any fear around death. But for whatever reason, that forgetfulness appears to be programmed in, even though we have experiences like deja vu, where we go, I know I've done this before. Does everybody or most people have that feeling? Unless it's because you can make the argument, like scientists have made, that it's an epileptic sort of mini seizure that's causing a glitch. But my response to that is that glitch just a failure of that inhibitory system that's in place to make sure that we don't remember that we've done this before? And that is part of the nature of the construct, because that's an argument as well. It's just not an argument that's being made. You can't just say, well, oh, this is just what's happening. Okay. Well, what if that thing that you're saying is happening is programmed to happen? Like, that's the intention, to make this feel like you are in fact mortal. In the podcast, The Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse, soon to be a book, I've said that this is a mortality training simulation. In various videos of my podcast, this one, Your One Black Friend, I have said that this world is a mortality simulation. What sort of civilization, what sort of entity would create a world where everything seems to end and everything ends and anything dies? Well, they're simulating endings. If they're simulating endings, if you create a construct where you take energy and you force it into matter and it degrades over time, which is just another construct, you're doing that for a purpose. The argument is Maybe the gods got bored. Eternity is a very long time. Sometimes when you're in a situation and it feels so intense because that's all you see, you're the forest, you're in the forest, so you can't see the trees. But I'd make the argument that if I'm right, a world without end, just consciousness just existing for over and over again, unable to end, is tedious. Knowing everything is tedious. Being everywhere all at once is tedious. I would argue, and I have argued in the past, that this world would be a welcome respite from the tyranny of immortality. Now, could we do things better here? Absolutely. And have we been working towards a better reality experience collectively? Yes, absolutely. And maybe that's another function of this reality. Maybe we are in some sort of beta testing program where the kinks are being worked out. To go back to the Matrix, I remember the architect said, I tried a world where everything was like paradise and the brain could not accept it. I'm not saying that the Matrix series is based on a documentary or is based in real life. I'm just giving you that as an analogy. And I want to say that maybe when this world was first created by immortal beings who didn't experience anything, who didn't experience suffering and could have whatever they wanted at a drop of a hat, they swung too far in the opposite direction of the pendulum where they made things very difficult. And then part of the process and part of why we're here is to come in and say, okay, maybe that's not necessary. Maybe we can do things differently here and there. And that's what we're working through. And then what we're experiencing is how we came to this part of working things out. Because our scientists are presently working on conquering death, conquering sickness, conquering disease. Of course, they're focused on the material level of it, but I'm constantly posting on my social media, on my Instagram, specifically in my stories, videos of people in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s, and they're kicking ass. And I want you guys to see that video because somebody came in and programmed us to age. I've seen people aging in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s, and it's psychosomatic. It's psychophysiological. They hold up an image and they say, this is what you're supposed to look like at 50. And your mind goes, oh, okay, cool. Because everything you're seeing right now is a projection of my mind. So whatever I believe I should be doing is what's going to happen in my life, in my mind, in my face. And so those who control what the collective believes about aging, about sickness, about disease and time, they show us that stuff. And we fall lock and step in line. You say things like, I shouldn't be doing that at that age. Throw your age away. It doesn't mean anything. Age means nothing. What you're doing is you're measuring a solar trip through space, and that's what you're calling a year. It has no relevance how many trips through space the sun has, that you have observed. It has nothing to do with anything. It's your body is breaking down because of toxins, because of radiation from the sun. It's a degradation, but also, because you believe that it's supposed to. They keep telling you down your throat, life expectancy, 75 years. That's what they tell you. They don't tell you that there's poison in our foods, there's poison in our drinks, there's poison in our tea bag. I saw something today that says don't drink tea bags, like teas from tea bags. You think you're being healthy drinking tea, but turns out they coat the tea bags in plastic. Then you steep that in hot water, and then it melts microplastic. You drink that, you put that into your body, it goes into your arteries, causes clogs. Now they're pulling out bits of plastic from people's arteries. You don't think over time, you putting glycophosphate in the form of GMO wheat, right? Glycophosphate, for those who don't know, is a chemical that's sprayed in our grains, corn, wheat, soy, chickpeas, all of that to prevent, they're pesticides, so to prevent bugs from growing on them. That doesn't go away. It doesn't get rinsed off. It doesn't get washed off. They spray that shit. They spray it directly, and then we eat it. It's poison. And your body, your immune system is so busy trying to fight this shit, fight the consequences of all of this poison that we're continuously putting, that over time it breaks the body down. I can't even tell you about just what is a natural sleep cycle. We don't know. Some people tell us we have to sleep 8 hours. Some people tell us you have to sleep at least 6 hours. Some people say You break your sleep up because that's how our ancestors used to sleep. They would sleep for half the night and wake up for a couple hours and then sleep again. We don't fucking know. And the fact that we don't know is wild to me. But it seems like, once again, it feels like a beta program. They're just sort of figuring things out. Who knows? What was I said to Allwin? I said, if you knew your body was a prison, how would you feel about dying? He said, I don't feel about passing. I feel about how the passing happens, how we grow old and have a hard time doing normal things like walking, running, even eating becomes hard in the last year as elderly people. I don't like how these things happen. I said, we don't have to age in that way. They told us that that is what is normal. And so we accept it as normal. And the mind accepts the command and executes it. 10 years ago, I told myself I wasn't going to age, and I haven't. If the placebo effect is real and the nocebo effect is real, nobody's arguing about the legitimacy of that effect. If these things are real, then what I'm saying is true. Allwin says, remember the old stories. In some cultures, they had gurus that can vanish into thin air when they decide to pass. They didn't age and pass, they just disappeared in a way, they dematerialized. I said, well, if matter isn't real in the way that we've understood matter to be real, and matter is just energy, then anything is possible. Maybe matter could dematerialize and to become pure energy. Who knows? Now, he says if this place is some sort of simulation, there should definitely be a keyword or something to say to log out. He said, before you texted me, I was thinking to think of this keyword. I said, you log out when you sleep. I talked about that in the podcast, about exiting the simulation. Maybe you don't have to wait till you die to exit. Maybe that's why if you take a nap, it's like a brief sort of like respite. You go out of this reality, this construct. And even though maybe you sleep for 15 minutes, but due to some sort of time dilation effect, you're actually gone for like a week in another reality, in another world. And you come back here refreshed, take a nap. He said, I don't know who's responsible for this realm, but when I find them, punch them in the face. I said, well, it may be you, in the sense of, are we all one entity having a collective experience? Consciousness, awareness as an entity, fractured through space and time in different forms, experiencing itself as Allwin, as Joe, as you, for some reason, all alone, all one. I think about an egg that passes through menstruation. It is said that we're born with a certain amount of eggs, and then every month we release. And if it's not fertilized, passes, and then the next one sort of comes along. And so the cycle continues. But then I think about parthenogenesis. And what parthenogenesis is self-fertilization, right? Some female creatures are able to fertilize their own eggs and create an offspring that's essentially a clone of themselves. And then I think about us in this reality. Do we loop back into the same life over and over again? The way an egg comes into this world, the way an egg is released, awaits fertilization, and then should nothing happen, disintegrates or is cast away as waste, and then the cycle repeats again. Now, this is important because you should not identify with the egg. You should identify with the consciousness that's awaiting fertilization within the egg, and the egg being nothing more than a shell. Now, it leads me to the idea of how do you define fertilization? Is that what we call self-actualization, where you sit in this reality and you go, okay, clearly this is a dream. You sit on your own, you observe your thoughts, and you go, wait, I'm not this thing. And through self-reflection, observation, self-education, you fertilize your own self, and then you become a full functioning being. And then some beings, obviously through sexual reproduction, need an external, a different entity, much like a sperm, to come in and then to create something new. And I wonder if an analogy can be found here in our reality as well. It makes me think of aliens. I don't know. In the sense of, so you have humanity, the human species, and we keep sort of creating more humans. And we are, through our experiences here on Earth, we are self-generating, self-fertilizing. And every new generation is slightly different from the last, but you're still creating a new generation of species. I should add that parthenogenesis only allows for the creation or the recreation of another female. In order to create males, you need the male sperm, right? And in the argument in the book, Sex, Time, and Power, Leonard Shlain makes the argument that one, the male is a relatively recent invention by nature, quote unquote invention, which I think is absolutely fascinating that he chose to use that word. And then two, every mammal up until I believe it's 6 weeks is female. I posted this to my stories with the tag, if we were born in her image, then call us by her name. God is female. If you are a religious person, it's only females that can essentially fertilize itself. It can perform this function of parthenogenesis. It's only females that can harbor, generate, and birth life. But the catch here is the catch 22, something you should listen to, is the fact that right around 6 to 8 weeks, here comes the man maker, testosterone. And excess levels of testosterone are released in the eggs, and that's what causes a male to form. That's why men have breasts. So the penis is just a clitoris that has grown oversized due to the chemical that is testosterone, right? The testicles, I believe that's the labia plus ovaries that have descended. So in a way, a male is an illusion. It's actually, men are just women. They're just a different form of women, but they're still women. They're just women with excess levels of testosterone that were introduced at the right time due to some external programming. Now, I've been playing with this idea. Remember how I've said, if you're looking for the truth lies in the inverse of what we're programmed to believe. We talk about the fall of man. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't ask myself, how did I end up in a patriarchy, being the kind of person that I am in this sort of reality? How the fuck did I end up here? But then I think about, is it mankind that fell or was it woman that fell? Because if the first deities were female and then somehow we found ourselves subjugated in the way that we are now, by we, I mean women, and this is a fall. It's a degradation, it's a step down. Something happened, which is what Shlain is trying to answer in his book, I think The Alphabet and the Goddesses, which I think once I finish that book, I will do an episode on that. But to go back, if it wasn't mankind that fell, but it was womankind that fell and fell because of the introduction of the male species, particularly what Shlain argues is, he says, at some point in time, females evolved first. And then they started experiencing very heavy periods, which then they noticed started to sync with the moon. And then they realized that, wait, things are cycles. And then they were able from that point on to plan due to understanding of cycles in a way that other creatures couldn't, like consistently. So the female invented what we know of as time now, the construct of time. What he also said was, due to our menstruation, we shed so much blood, we lose so much blood that our ancestors needed sources of iron. And what he said was very poignant to me was that men are the way they are physically because it was women that chose them. His argument was that when you are anemic or borderline anemic, low in iron, and you need that to essentially survive, right? Because look up anemia, it's not a good thing. Like you need iron. The best source of absorption, or I should say the best source of absorbable iron, can only be found in animals, according to Shlain. And of course, you need to be able to hunt game. Now, females, before the onset of these heavy menstruations that we began to have as hominids, could go and hunt along with males and gather as well. But then it's really hard to hunt when you're bleeding. It's not like they had like tampons back then or pads or, silicone cups. To have a menstruation that attracts predators is dangerous. So what happened was an adaptation. The women stayed back while the men went out to hunt. And another thing was also the weakness of a human baby at birth is so helpless that it forced women to stay back together and sort of nurture while the men went out. And now, as they went out to hunt, the most dominant, violent, or at the very least predisposed to violence, male, was the one who was capable of going out and killing animals and then bringing it back to the female. So as a result of this, we ended up in a situation where biologically things started to change. Women could no longer go out and hunt. We got smaller. Men started going out and hunting. They got bigger, they got more aggressive, they got more predisposed to violence. And so came along the patriarchy, the shift, because we selected males that were more likely or more prone to be able to, more capable of going out and hunting. It was their genes, the hunter genes, that were able to get sort of like they were able to mate with the females. And then that got passed on to the next generation. And now here we have where men are that much bigger than women because it's a reflection of our past. Women have gotten smaller because, well, if you're not hunting and you're staying back and you're not moving in this way, natural selection is not selecting for those traits in you the same way that they would in men, or it would in men, if that makes sense. A very interesting thesis that led me to an inversion of a couple of ideas that I wanted to share with you guys, just so you guys have something to think about. First, I think about the story of men are from Mars and women are from Venus, but I want to rewrite that. It is said, and is actually noted in Who Built the Moon, that Venus at one time sort of emerged the same time as Earth. And I would argue that Venus and Earth were twin planets. There was a time that Venus used to be habitable. Same thing with Mars, actually. And these are the three planets, Mars, Venus, and Earth, that are in that Goldilocks zone to sustain life. Something happened. Mars can no longer support life. Venus can no longer, at least to our understanding, doesn't appear to be able to support life on the surface either anymore. Same with Mars. Now, I'm not saying what I'm about to present to you is the absolute truth. It's just a story. And the story, as all stories of all narratives, are meant to unlock something in your mind and getting you to think in a different way. That's it. That is the purpose of the podcast, and it's the purpose of the story. But what if it wasn't men are from Mars and women are from Venus? What if there were two different civilizations of women millions of years ago, or females? Maybe not necessarily hominid females, maybe not necessarily Homo sapiens, but intelligent life forms, but females who at some point, and I've talked about this before, it's in my book, it's on the podcast repeatedly. It's called the Cerulean hypothesis. And the argument is that given Earth's age, humanity could not have been the only advanced civilizations to have walked the face of the earth, of intelligent civilizations to have walked the face of the earth. Now, parthenogenesis is something that occurs primarily in like reptiles and in fish and amphibians. But some scientists make the argument that some human women may have also been able to and have done this. Like there might be women out there whose daughters may not actually be like daughters of their spouse, like whose daughters might actually be clones of them in the sense of they fertilize their own eggs. But because it's, just because the nature of research, there's no way of really testing this out. But I just find that interesting. So I want to make the argument of two ways. I want to imagine it as a human story, or at least a humanoid story. But you can imagine it as reptiles if you want to as well. Doesn't really matter. What if there was a time when Mars, Venus, and maybe Earth were all habitable, and Mars contained a civilization of essentially very masculine women, very masculine females, in the sense of logical, left brain, scientific, strong, but also warmongering, much like the males that we have in our reality now. And so Martians were essentially like you would think the Amazonians, right? They cut their breasts to do battle, but they were also the scientists. They were the ones who kind of went against nature or saw themselves wanting to improve on nature. And those were the Martians. And they were a planet of females. And then Venus was the polar opposite. We were the more hyper feminine females, where they also engaged in parthenogenesis. However, they were more in tune with their world, with their reality. They were more spiritual. They were more intuition driven as opposed to logically driven, the Martians. Now imagine Martian females, and there were no males at this time. It was all just either really masculine females, which you even see that in homosexual couplings, right? You have masculine. So think that like masculine females in Mars, for the most part, they dominated their society. So it was a masculine, it wasn't a patriarchy, still matriarchy on both planets, but the energy was masculine. And Martians, let's say the Martians had higher levels of testosterone, and then the Venusians had higher levels of estrogen, but they were all female, no males. Men had not been invented yet. And then one day, the Martian scientists decided to create a creature that allowed for females to essentially procreate, but something other than one's clone, right? Remember, I said that parthenogenesis, it just leads to you essentially cloning yourself. It's asexual reproduction. And a clone doesn't necessarily mean it's going to look exactly like you. They did studies on this. They showed like it was a cat clone, same genetic, but with slight variants. There's another article I was sent about these twins. One was born, they were both born in, I think, China, but one was raised in the US and then one was raised in like the Netherlands or whatever. And because of just what they were exposed to diet wise and environment, one twin ended up being more overweight and shorter, the one that was raised in the US versus the other twin who was raised in like the Netherlands or something like that. So just because you genetically have the same background doesn't mean that you're going to look exactly the same, or like phenotypical expressions are going to be identical, right? There's still nurture, there's still environment that impacts and affects how you present. But back to the study, I saw there was a cat that was cloned, but its fur was different colors, right? So it could still be you. You can still, if you were a human being capable of parthenogenesis, your clone that you birth and auto-fertilized would look like you, but just slightly different. But I want to make the argument that some scientists on this Mars colony of predominant females decided, well, we have testosterone, which is, so I'm sure you guys know that females also have testosterone, right? It's just there's variants of it. What if we took a fetus and we just injected it with excess levels of testosterone? And I want you to imagine Mars is like where we're going now, where like incubated babies, because these women were like not about that life. Like these were like about business, they're about science, like these like Martians, right? So and their scientists were all about like we're not trying to be doing this motherhood thing, like this and the other, like we're science. And so they interjected and they started messing about and they decided, yeah, we're going to, they recognized that testosterone is what made them strong and fast. And they're like, well, what if we could make faster, stronger females? So all this time they weren't trying to create something called a male. They were just trying to genetically engineer faster, stronger, better females. And that's how the men came to be. I want to pull in the theory, what's it, Zachariah Sitchin's, and he said that like humanity was created from apes in order to like mind gold. And I'm like, you guys know how I feel about that theory. Take it and I throw it, but I want to take a little bit out. I want to keep the baby, throw away the bathwater. What if the Martians created this new race of females that they called males to help them? They wanted bigger, stronger, faster females to be able to serve, not necessarily as a slave race, but for the sake of this conversation, let's call it a slave race. They created these more masculine females and they called them men. The nature of men, the purpose of men that they created, which at the time they didn't, it was just, they saw them as just females, but like literally on steroids, right? Because you guys know the steroids is like hormones. That's what they did. And then they brought about the male. And then the purpose of the males was to serve, to essentially do the things that they didn't want to do, right? The harder things, labor intensive things, basically what we see men doing now. And they were created to follow, to take instructions. And then over time, a second class of males existed. And then they started utilizing, and let's say maybe the discovery of sperm and its ability to fertilize an egg came about by accident. Maybe one supreme Martian, this should be a movie, by the way. And if you're watching this and you want to make this movie, holler at me. Yeah, I'd be pissed off. I see the shit on Black Mirror and I'm not on it. But maybe just one colonel, female colonel decided, like, obviously they were all lesbians, right? And they saw this like very, very, very masculine female, and it really, turned her on. And then long story short, she got pregnant, but it wasn't like the baby came out and all of a sudden she birthed like a hybrid. I'm calling it a hybrid. It's actually male. I'm calling it a hybrid for the sake of story, but that's what a male was. It was like a, egg and a sperm. And then they started to realize, oh shit, like, wait, we don't have to do this parthenogenesis thing anymore. We can actually use the males and then we can have babies when we want, as opposed to waiting for it to like sort of just sort of happen automatically. And then women began to forget about their ability to do this. Because think about it, right back to technology. There was a time when you used to be able to memorize like people's phone numbers, like you knew everybody's phone numbers, and now most people don't. There was a time when people remembered and memorized like whole religious textbooks and still do. The mind is meant to hold a lot of information, but once you give that ability away to something else, you lose the ability to do so. And I'm wondering if that's what happened. Once the Martians began to, the Martians, they're all females until they invented the male. I know there's some guys listening to this right now. They're like, what? Once they realize, wait, we can use one male to impregnate all of us and create more offsprings that have the variants, they started to do it. And maybe not even impregnate. Like, let's go back to the whole, they were just using like, like artificial wombs and stuff like that, because not only were they warriors, but they were scientists. Like the extreme version of left-brained, dominant sort of like activities that would happen, science and war. We're seeing that in our society now, science and war. And like I said, the slave class of just the males that were genetically created by the Martians started to kind of form. And then over time, as it always happens, the pendulum swung and the males began to come together. I'm thinking Planet of the Apes, but instead of apes, it's like men, right? And they began to sort of come together, and then they realized, wait, like we're stronger, right? We're bigger, right? We don't want to be subjugated in this way anymore. And they dominated the Martians, the Martian females, and subdued them. And then over time, these monstrosities of like hyper-masculine females, which essentially were engineered by the Martians, began and they dominated and took over Mars. And then it became essentially a patriarchy over time. And then they began to war with each other, because that's what that masculine energy does when it's unchecked. And then they destroyed the planet. And then Venus comes in, and Venus, they're still hyper feminine, but they've lived sort of like, think the Na'vi in Avatar. So they're just chilling, like they're doing their parthenogenesis thing. They're just chilling, kicking it, just like they know that the Martians are tripping or whatever, but like they like the Martians, you know what I mean? Like this, opposites attract or whatever, but they're like, yo, those motherfuckers are wild. We're just gonna do our own thing, this, that, and the other. And then once the males in Mars dominated, then they decided, okay, what do men do, right? They start spreading. That's what they do, right? They move like sperm. They go and they build their spaceships, and they went and invaded Venus, and then kind of took over that planet and then dominated them. And then, of course, as they destroyed Mars over time, they then destroyed Venus. And then Earth became sort of a silo, so to speak, where the survivors of whatever happened were sent to Earth and to start over, as well as with species from Mars and species from Venus here, which is why I think you see so much genetic variations. I should chime in. This is a story I'm making up, okay? Just right now as I'm talking to you guys. I sort of play with the idea, talk to Cosmic and Sublime Liberation about this, but like, yeah, I'm just making stuff. But anyway, they came to Earth, and you guys are welcome in the comments to add on if you're vibing with this, if this makes sense to you. But they came to Earth, and maybe they came to Earth, but there was still some sort of understanding of like, look, it's always been women. It was women first, and they kind of like were, they honored that history. So they brought, their goddess worship and Inanna and, Athena and all of that. It's some ancient, warriors of the past, like from Mars or whatever, from Venus, that they brought into Earth. But then as time went on Earth, right, people started forgetting. And once again, the males began becoming more and more dominant. And then this breeding that I referred to earlier happened, where women started getting smaller and smaller. I think you're supposed to be the same height, to be honest, or at least close. But then women started getting smaller and smaller due to menstruation. Men started getting bigger and bigger and even more violent. And then, boom, now we have the world that we have now. Wouldn't that be a trip? I'm just looking at the camera right now for those of you listening to this. It's not something that I've ever heard anybody say. And obviously it's clearly a collection of all these different sort of ideas. And I do hope to have more data to kind of add to pull these stories together. I think over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have Cosmic on. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to have Sublime Liberation on. We're going to talk about this and a couple other people who talk to me about like Athena in the past and goddess worship. We're really going to explore this over time too. But what if? I mean, we know that collectively we're forgetting something. We know that collectively, like history isn't what her story isn't what we understand it as, right? The stories of the victims are erased and it's the victor's story that's told to us. But I'm telling you, the order that we have of it being male dominated doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not saying that I want women to dominate. I'm saying that, well, certainly matriarchal societies seem to be more balanced. This world is a female world. Earth is female. Gaia is a goddess. You know, Mars is a male god. Venus, though, is a goddess. And I feel like there are all these sort of stories that low-key support this idea. But I don't even know if we understand Mars to be masculine because, for whatever reason, I don't know. But who knows, like, what is sort of hidden in the recesses of our subconscious, and that's kind of why I like to sit and do the stream of consciousness conversations, because there's things just come and you just never know. But it will explain why men have titties. After I was like, I had this idea, I was talking to my husband and I was just like, you deformed woman. He was not entertaining. He's a big guy. He's like 6'3", like 280, 290 pounds, stocky, you know, but like in a way, it's like they're just women. Technically, it's a planet of females. If you deep it, it's a planet of females. It's just what we call male, right? Are just females with excess testosterone. That's it. That's why a person can have like a sex change operation and sort of look like a man once they start taking hormones. I'm not advocating for that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just telling you though, like it happens. Like it's hormones. It's all hormones, right? Some people like to dismiss love as just nothing more than like chemicals. Well, if that's the case, right? It's dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, right? If you can call love that and break it down to just chemicals being released and it's just part of driving you to mate. You can also take that a step further and say the same thing with men. Like they're just females with chemicals. Like that's it. Don't shoot the messenger. Like it's just that's the math and it's math. There's nothing wrong with that. You guys are just really buff ass, swole ass females with giant clitoris. Oh God, I'm gonna get canceled one of these days. But it's true. Tell me where the lie is. Ultimately, it doesn't matter, right? So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, the material world is an illusion. Your physical form is an illusion. Male, female, it's an illusion. All right. But these vehicles obviously exist for a particular reason within the simulation. And obviously the simulation had to have had, I'm smirking as I say this, but they had to have had like different expansions and expansion packs. You know, I'll leave you guys with this. Look, I'm always asked, and I always have to answer why the simulation hypothesis is because those thoughts that Allwin had plague me. And it's what drove me and has driven me to read as much as I write the books that I've written and I'm writing, and to put out the videos, because the alternative is despair and depression, to be perfectly honest. I don't know if I'm right, but there's certainly a lot of information out there that supports what I have to say on the nature of reality, on the nature of consciousness, on the nature of death and dying and immortality. And I think there's a lot more information out there that supports the concept, the idea that what we have been told about the nature of reality isn't what it seems, than the contrary. So I present all these ideas for you to think about, and you can form and construct whatever your belief system is, because at the end of the day, it's what you believe that helps you get through life. And you have that ability to discard what we've been told by gaslighters anyway, because we're chronically being lied to. We'll find out these people stay lying to us. So like, why accept what they tell us about life, about nature, about reality? Come up with your own philosophy, come up with your own theosophy, come up with your own beliefs, and help you get through this thing called life. But as for me, in my mind, as I've said, most of what I've read supports what I'm sharing with you guys in this podcast. And it's something that majority of human beings believed in up until recent times. The cyclical nature of reality, the illusory nature of reality, that nothing dies, that there's something called spirit outside of form, and you honor that. So sit with that, honor it, think about it. Because the alternative, well, where's the fun and beauty and magic in that? Thanks for watching.